Now, right now, there are 2 Republican candidates running in the primary to eventually challenge Sorensen this November. And News 8's Jenna Webster sat down with both of them. She joins us here today. All right, maybe we should start with some of the history here. This has been a really contested district for a long time.
Yeah, well, and you remember it when Sorensen won a couple years ago. You were covering the race that night, and that night, I believe I remember, it was too close to call. It wasn't until I think Thursday that AP officially said that Sorensen was the winner. It was only by 4 percentage points, which actually, interestingly enough, was the same thing when Shelby Bustos beat Esther Joy King, the same person that Sorensen beat a couple years before that. But you and I were talking about it was a very widely Democratic race before that, where Lane Evans, held the seat for more than 20 years after him. It was Phil Hare who took over, and it wasn't until after Phil Hare lost his re-election campaign to Bobby Schilling, he was the first Republican since before Lane Evans to take it. So, since the 1980s, which is totally crazy. And then he lost to Shelby Bustos, which was interesting because it was right after there was the redistricting in 2011, 2012, and it was kind of thought that with that redistricting, it was going to favor Democrats again in the 17th district, which ended up being when Shelby Bustos won.
So now you got these 2 Republicans running against each other for the primary. Let's start with McGraw. Who is he?
Okay, so he is a retired judge. He was a prosecutor up in Rockford for like 20 years. So he's talked a lot about how his experience on the bench has kind of shaped, some of the things that he wants to prioritize in Congress, and kind of thinking that his experience as a judge will also help him with decision making. He said one of the things he told me was, as a judge, you don't get to vote present. Like, you have to make a decision, and it's not always going to be the most popular one. Someone's always going to disagree with you, so he thinks that's going to help him in Congress. But kind of his top things, he's very law and order, wants to increase funding for the police, has talked a lot about border safety, wanting to build the border wall, expand border patrol. His other big thing is the economy, wanting to cut taxes on American factories to kind of help bring back jobs to those places, and addressing the impacts of inflation. But I think he's very much looking forward to the possibility to run against Sorensen because he thinks he'll bring more values of the 17th district to Washington. Instead, he has kind of criticized Sorensen for bringing Washington values to the 17th district.
Interesting. And now his challenger is a Milan farmer, is that right?
Yes, yes. So Scott Krall has lived in Milan, farmed in Milan for more than 30 years. He also, with his job over at the Quad Cities International Airport, used to be a union president. So he is a political outsider, but kind of thinks that, might come to his advantage, that people don't want someone who has all this big political knowledge. They want someone who has kind of walked in their shoes to represent them, and he thinks he has. So he, honestly, he and McGraw have pretty similar things that they want to do. Law and order is another big one for him. Immigration reform, the border patrol. An interesting thing with border patrol for him is that he wants to do DNA tests on the adults and kids crossing the border to make sure that they are actually related. The economy is another one, inflation. He says he will not raise taxes on anyone. But his third big thing is energy independence and wanting to kind of bring that back to America and encouraging private sector places to invest in energy independence in America.
Well, the few seconds we have left, has Eric Sorensen said anything about these 2?
We have not heard anything from Sorensen specifically about these 2. I'm sure once, he has his challenger next week, that'll all change.
All right. Thanks so much, Jenna.
Yeah, thank you.
And for you guys at home, that full story with Scott Krall is coming up tonight at 10 o'clock. You can already find our story with Joe McGraw online right now at WQAD.com.